Great, hi, and welcome on behalf of Blast Theory to the Blast Theory studio for the Constant Washing Machine launch. My name is Hannah Redler-Hawes. I am a white middle-aged woman, quite short, wearing a black sparkly jumper and glasses. I have brown and grey long hair. I'm also an independent curator and an associate at the Open Data Institute, where I direct the Data as Culture Art programme, which commissioned Constant Washing Machine from Blast Theory as part of a project with University of Sheffield, who I'll come to in a moment. So Blast Theory are an artist collective and group who make interactive art across a range of media and approaches to explore social and political questions. And Matt Adams is the lead artist on this project, Constant Washing Machine. Also with us this evening for the conversation, Denis Newman-Griffis, who is a senior lecturer in computer science at the University of Sheffield and the principal investigator on the university's research project FRAIM, Framing Responsible AI Implementation and Management, in which Blast Theory have been embedded artists in residence. And Susan Oman is senior lecturer in data, AI and society at the University of Sheffield and co-lead on the FRAIM project. So we'll say a little bit more about what that means in a minute. But first of all, the context in which Constant Washing Machine has been made is within this much wider interdisciplinary cross-sector project that's looking at responsible AI. And I think we'll start with Denis and just say, what is responsible AI and how does this connect to the FRAIM project?
It's a good question to start with. So I'm Denis. I am a tall, white, non-binary person with somewhat faded blue hair at the moment, wearing a black smoking jacket, black skirt, and a green turtleneck. So, I'll say my pronouns are they, them. When we think, asking this question of what is responsible AI is actually really at the heart of the project that we've done together. We know that artificial intelligence is one of these things where there's a lot of potential that's highlighted, a lot of potential benefits in use for efficiency, and that gets thrown around a lot, benefits in helping us write, even ways to be creative. But obviously, we also know there are a lot of potential and actual harms that come from ill-informed use of AI. And so when we talk about responsible AI, this is really an umbrella for talking about how we go about working with AI technologies and AI methods in a more socially responsible and equitable way. But getting from those principles of we want to do this right to the practice of here's how we actually do it is very much nebulous. And so this is exactly what we set up the FRAIM project to try to investigate, was trying to take this idea of what responsible AI means and looks like in practice, and to get an understanding of that working with a set of cross-sector organizational partners. So I'll just say a little bit about what was in the project to kind of set the stage for some of what we'll be talking about. The project had two different components to the research. So we did an analysis of academic literature and of policy and guideline documents that have been written in the last couple of years. So we looked at documents written in 2023 and then up to the Seoul Safety Summit in April of 2024. So a time that's a time of transformation for the kind of mainstreaming of AI.
And because you've said to me before, this is a moment where AI, Gen AI, enters the mainstream. So people's perceptions of AI are in the public imagination are becoming quite specific.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to look at the kinds of documents that were being put out into this public discourse as a way of seeing how is it that responsible use of these technologies is being understood and is changing in this moment. So we paired that then with doing interviews with staff members at some of our partner organizations. We had the pleasure of working with the Open Data Institute, with the British Library, with Evident, and with Sheffield City Council on this. And we wanted to talk to staff who are working within these organizations to understand, for them, from their perspectives, with their individual experiences, what did responsible AI mean, and what would it look like to put that into practice. And so the project was about kind of getting these senses from documents and from talking to people who are at the sticky end of working with AI to try to make this idea of responsible AI a little bit more tangible, a little bit something where we can have a shorter and clearer answer to this question of what is responsible AI and how do we do it?
Thank you. I'm going to take that cue to turn to Susan and say, Susan, would you like to respond to the same question? What is responsible AI, particularly building on your research?
So I think it's interesting in terms of the people that we spoke to in the organisation. Responsible AI meant very different things for them. And I think that reinforces a lot of what we've done previously in other research projects. So responsible AI, often I think we get distracted by what does AI mean, when I think actually maybe one of the core questions is, what does responsibility mean? And what does it mean in different contexts to different people? So I think responsible AI is, you've just talked about Gen AI as a particular moment. I think that we're going to end up reflecting on a responsible AI moment where lots of people got together in rooms or online just like this to talk about what responsible AI is. And that meaning may not be constant, it may change. Yeah.
Really slippery. Slipperiness brings us to soap.
Yeah.
And Matt, I know we're going to talk about the piece, Constant Washing Machine. But first of all, can I just ask you as an artist, we approached you based on Denis and Susan's approach to us at the ODI. We have to include artists in this project. It's an interdisciplinary cross-sector thing. What attracted you about being part of that collective?
I think it's always exciting to be in an interdisciplinary framework. I feel that as I learn more about AI, we did a project using AI last year. As we learned more about it, the level of my ignorance became clear. And so it's one of those things where it's sort of fractal. It feels like it's endlessly complex. As you open up something, you realize that there is another whole set of nested concerns. You three gave us this really great invitation, which is come in, attend things, listen into things, talk to researchers. We'll give you access to interviews and to research materials and then respond to it. So it was an incredibly open and generous brief. I love working with interdisciplinary teams. And so what's I think important to emphasize here is that the industrial partners, so as they might be called in the nomenclature of research councils, are actually doing this stuff for real on the ground, and were incredibly thoughtful. To see interviews with British Library or to meet people from Sheffield City Council, it's really striking how they are thinking really deeply about how to do this well. They're trying really hard to do this well, and they're doing it from an ethical position where they see real benefits to how they can serve the public and serve wider society. So I think, for us as artists, we're coming to listen, to ask questions, in some ways sort of proxy for a general public, because we're not experts, we're not people who are deeply immersed in that field. And then, of course, we have this terrible challenge, which is, and can you take all of that and make an artwork about the issue of responsible AI, which I think, Nick and I were fairly daunted by for a good little while. And I am prepared. I've come here today to answer for the question of why soap, and I'm willing to do that when that moment arrives.
We're going to come to that, but first I just want to jump back to you, Denis, and say you approached us at the Open Data Institute and said, we love your data culture programme, thank you, and we'd like to have some artists working on this project. What was really important to you about having artists in the mix of something already interdisciplinary?
Well, thinking about, asking these questions of what is responsible AI, that is inherently interdisciplinary, because you're talking about technologies that are being used by people to do things. And so you already have the mix of what are those people doing, how do they think about it, how is the technology built, and so on. And what is really beneficial to us about working with artists, and what was really exciting about the ability to do that in this project, was that art can really help you think differently. And it's thinking the same way that gets us into every AI mess that happens. It's when we just think, okay, this is how we do whatever it is that we're doing, it's how we repeat the processes that we're doing before, that we end up embedding the problems, the biases, the harms that AI tools can produce. And so the chance to work with artists on this project and the amazing experience of getting to work with Blast Theory on this really helped us to kind of prod how can we think differently and how can we tell different stories about what responsible AI means and how to act on it, so that it's not just this nebulous pie in the sky thing of what those people over there are doing.
And the thing that really excited me about the offer you brought to us was that you were not saying, we're going to do some research and then we want some artists to make some work to promote the research. We had a conversation, quite a long conversation, about what were your expectations, given that you were applying for some funding and you would funnel that to us, to artists. And the thing that I loved, and I think was appealing perhaps to you as Blast Theory, was that there was no requirement to make a finished object. That was a conversation with Blast Theory. If you want to make a thing, we'd love a thing, but actually you being part of the research project and contributing to the research and the provocation was really central. And I am going to come back to that soon, Matt, but I would like to just see, this is an almost unfair question, Denis, but can you summarise the sort of key findings or learnings from the core research in a way that might sort of set the scene for how Constant Washing Machine has been such an exceptionally sharp and incisive response to that?
Sure. I think in some ways the key word is inconsistency. That what we see from the work that we've been doing, from the analysis of literature and from the interviews, is that responsible AI means so many different things to so many different people. And policy documents are very much written from a self-driven perspective of an organization putting out something that's about what they do with the people who they speak to. And every one of these pieces that we look at, whether it's a document describing responsible AI or an interview about it, what we're really seeing is that they're all very different snapshots of the same very large jigsaw. So every piece tells us one part of the story, and when we start to combine those pieces, when we look across the differences that we see in sectors, the differences between organizations within a sector, the enormous differences that happen when you talk to different people in the same organization, they understand these things very differently. What we start to get when we pull these together across the breadth of the project is an initial image of what that broader jigsaw looks like. And it is really seeing responsibility as being cited in the everyday and in the every people who we are talking to.
Brilliant, thank you. Susan, has anything surprised you about the findings? You've been in this field for a long time from many different angles.
I'm not sure it surprised us. I think in many ways we may have found some things we were expecting to find. I think what's nice is some of the ways that what we've found has reinforced some instincts, perhaps that's a better way of putting it.
Can you unpack what some of those were a bit?
So I think one of the key things that Blast Theory have pulled out is the importance of meaning and meaning making. And so one thing that we've talked about previously is it's quite difficult for different people to understand AI as one thing or many things. And so often people get distracted and may find themselves actually inventing or imagining what AI is in different contexts. So once you add the word responsibility to the mix, actually imagining what responsibility in terms of AI means to you as an individual, whether that's at work or whether you're making a benefits claim, or even if it's like whether you get a cheap flight to Barbados, whatever it is, your relationship to the idea of responsibility in an AI context is constantly changing. And I think thinking about how different, taking what we learned from the interviews and taking what we learned from the policy documents and the other documents that we analysed, looking at how the meaning of responsibility is diffuse within an organisation, within lawmaking, within policy making in international or national contexts, is a really important thing to explore in and of itself. And that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed talking to Blast Theory about.
I think one of the things that really struck me as I started to look at the material, you had gathered this amazing range of AI policies, which I would be lying if I say I had read, but I did skim quite a few of them and read bits of some of them. There were hundreds. Is that for this as a project, I felt that there was a real combination of trying to think philosophically and ethically about this, but also try and put that into practice and deal with people who are actually doing AI right now. So the British Library, for example, they are clearly engaged in a process where AI is a tool that is absolutely essential to how they will develop as an organisation.
That
They
manages information. They're the
yeah,
national
exactly.
holder of
They cannot sit this
information.
out, right? They have to get on board now
Yeah.
and do something. And yet they are also trying to go slow enough to get it right and quick enough to stay relevant. And I think that's a really fascinating place to be situated. And it's unusual, I think, in a research project to have that sense that it is happening right here and right now. I was really struck by, the snapshot of policies you had. The ones that are 12 months old feel older than the ones that are 6 months old, even to an ingenue like me. I can see that the field is moving so quickly that the sense of what it is that we're doing and how we're using this and what the threats and the possibilities are is changing in real time.
That feels so relevant because it's really like in this field, the last century thinking of governance that allowed things to be written in stone, and I am making a slight visual relationship with the soaps, doesn't work in the digital networked world. It just can't stay the same for long enough. But I think that gives people a little bit of an overview of the FRAIM project and the context into which blast theory entered as researchers and artists. And what they've come up with is constant washing machine. Matt, could you tell us about the piece?
One of the things that we talked about quite a lot was about the ways in which these policies, the best policies, are really working hard to go, right, this is what good AI does. And it tries to grab hold of things to ground this in the real way. So you find often in the documents things about transparency. Transparency is a good value and is important. Responsible AI should be transparent. Meta's document, for example, talks a lot about alignment, and that is obviously a complex term with a big history, but what they mean is sort of alignment with good values or the right intentions, but they don't really specify what alignment means in that document. And so it just really struck me that you could take that in any number of different ways as to what you think alignment with Meta's requirements are. There might be times where that would be to, deal with equity, at a global level, but it might also be at a time where it is to maximize the bottom line and ensure that revenue is generated. That is a slippery term. So from that, we then looked a little bit at the metaphorical nature of AI itself, which is AI includes the word intelligence. And that was controversial from the very origins of this field. There were some people who were vigorously opposed to the idea that the word intelligence should be attached here, because what is intelligence, and can computers be even deemed to have it, or it be a sensible goal for computers to have it? You sort of have to answer a question of what is intelligence. So you get into this sort of endlessly recursive set of questions about what is meaning around that. And without trying to get too sort of lost in that, I think we became fascinated with the idea that these are very difficult things to get hold of, but we also wanted to reflect the fact that there were researchers like Susan, Denis, and others who had done really strong work on this is what responsible AI does look like. It's not a sort of an endlessly airy subject. It's like there are things that we can talk about. So we wanted to try and find a meeting point between that. And so, one of the sort of, at the end of quite a long series of discussions that Nick and I had, I said, and there was this really stupid one, but I'm not sure about that. But I had this one about soap, and Nick was like, tell me a little bit about that. And of course, it ended up that the things that seemed like they were more intelligent or on point actually fell away. And this became an interesting thing because soap also has this quality of human touch and bodily presence. And I felt that that part of the problem about AI is this idea that it is sort of an intellectual and abstracted practice that exists at some sort of higher code level and that does not acknowledge that we're all human beings in the mud of this thing. And so I think it really appealed to us that soap is something that we touch, soap is something that we use every day. And soap and washing is it's both a completely private thing and a completely social thing. We do it generally in private, but we do it for social reasons, right? We don't just wash for ourselves, we wash for others. And our sense of what is an appropriate level of washing and how to wash is also really interesting. And one of the ideas we had for this project was that the bars of soap would go into the washrooms of the organizations, little realizing, of course, that in a post-COVID era, no one has soap you can touch anymore. But in my house and in many other people's houses, the soap is something that you touch. You pick up the soap that someone else has just put down and you wash your hands, and in doing so, you have some kind of exchange of touch. So we were interested to try and represent that sort of swirl of ideas where meaning is elusive and difficult, but also the habits that we use every day is where responsible activity happens. And I was really struck with these policies and procedures where I'm trying to yawn my way through them. I'm like, how many members of staff are reading these things and then going, cool, there's clause 5.4 of the responsible AI policy, I'll be enacting that today.
Absolutely.
No one does that, right? So it's like, actually, it's sort of, we build habits and reflexes, and that is how...
embodying it.
Yeah.
What do you intuitively do? And really considering intuitive, bodily, visceral knowledge.
Exactly.
And that's something that starts to really feel owned by humans, by people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so putting the humans in the loop. And stuff.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a little bit about how Constant Washing Machine has perhaps extended the research, but I think that first we might move to a small performance that Matt's going to lead.
Oh, great.
And we'll come back to that when there'll be time for questions as well.
Great. So I'm just going to introduce us very briefly. In turn, I've invited Susan, Denis, Hannah to take a bar of soap and to wash their hands with it. It's going to be just a very short performance. And part of the idea of soap is that the words of responsible AI chosen by the researchers are embedded into these soaps. So
Tell us what the words are.
the eight words or phrases that are here were chosen by 8 different researchers or participants in the FRAIM project. What we have here is practice, iteration, inclusion, transparency, context, care, data is the feedstock of AI, and shared understanding. And we asked the researchers to pick something that they considered to be essential to responsible AI. And then part of the thinking about these bars of soap is that we wash our hands with the soap, and in doing so, inculcate that knowledge into our bodily memory. It is a practice that we do, but in doing so, we also erase the words and the letters until the words are gone. So it is through a process of sort of habit and repetition that we build this knowledge into our bodily systems, into our sense of our practice that we live every day. And you are very welcome to stand up and come closer and please watch. You do not need to stay sitting down. You are also welcome to stay sitting down. And I'm going to go first, and I am going to pick a bar of soap. I've chosen transparency. Susan, would you like to choose a word?
Okay, so I'm choosing the word iteration. I'm realising how difficult it is to wash your hands with long sleeves.
Great, thank you. Denis, would you like to go next?
Let's see. I think I will choose inclusion.
Thanks, Denis. Hannah.
I'll come join you on the move out of the spotlight here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to choose care.
Great, thank you. And those of you who are attending here in person, you're very much invited to wash your hands with a bar of soap at the end of the event. So if you'd like to, we'd love that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. So are there any burning questions from the audience, online or in the room? Thank you. Oh, do we have a roving mic? Or if we have people online, so if there's no roving mic, I'll repeat your question.
Okay, great.
I really love it so much. The concept. But I'm just curious, with that object, is there any relationship between how much you, like, how deep you engrave the words in relationship to how long you think lighting can embody in your body, in terms of AI knowledge become like part of like responsible? I'm just curious if there's any relationship.
So the question, if I've understood it correctly, firstly, that you love the work, yay. And then, is there a relationship between how deep the words are carved in the soap with how long you think the AI analogy will last?
Well, we've definitely missed a trick there. Because no, there isn't. But clearly there should be. Yeah, thank you. No, that's a great idea.
To be fair, we didn't have a quantitative component to the research to measure exactly how long it should last.
Yeah, how many millimeters deep?
Yes.
You know, that's...
So not necessarily less, but just from the research and study, like for lighting to really embody, become, responsible AI.
So I think...
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you repeat what she said?
Yeah, so you're asking kind of from the research study perspective, how long would it take to embody responsible AI? And I think, the time involved would differ from person to person. So certainly from what we see, people's understanding of what AI is differs, what their understanding of what responsibility is differs, and what the kind of closeness of responsible practice to them is differs. So the depth would vary from person to person, but I think what is really key with it is that surface understanding, the surface name of this is the thing that I'm doing, that does erode and erase over time, but that the scope into which it was imprinted is still there. So it's that representation that the practice remains, even if the name that we've chosen for it goes away or is lost or becomes just part of the day-to-day of a person.
Thank you. We have a question here.
It's more of a comment.
Okay.
But it's really interesting watching and seeing, to me, maybe I'm overreading, but like us witnessing is a part of our understanding. I felt like I was at some sort of strange wedding ceremony where the chief operators, the key players are doing their thing, but one of the things that I feel at those ceremonies is that we're all sort of responsible for the well-being of the couple's future life together. So it sort of made me think of those sorts of things.
Can I just paraphrase that for people online? So you've said it's a bit like witnessing was as important as understanding, and it felt a little bit like being at a strange wedding, but you've compared that to the moment, I guess, in the wedding ceremony where they say, family and friends of the people who are getting married, do you agree to support them? And you all go, we will. Which is, carry on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also the tension of like the situation, it's quiet, you're washing your hands, but the tension of unknowing how the future unfolds, it all felt like it converged really like wonderfully for me.
So for you, the tension of the moment really converged really wonderfully. Thank you. I won't invite you to respond to that. I'm going to go straight to a question that's come from online from subspatial_anomaly, who says, should we adopt Asimov laws or similar for AI? Matt.
Oh my God. So, no, thank you for your question, which I have given deep thought to. Well, I mean, the whole reason of the Asimov laws, as I understand them, is that they work brilliantly, even though they're incredibly concise and focused. And I think the problem with AI is to do with its amorphous nature. And so actually, I think that it's going to be endlessly a sort of palimpsest of interlocking, overlapping forms of practice and regulation. I'm a big believer that regulation is going to be is a big part of where we need to go, right? This idea that regulation is sort of getting in the way is like, I don't subscribe to that for 1 minute. It is just going to take us a little time to realize that as we had with social media, actually regulation.
Still working on that.
It's like I hope that the sort of libertarian moment of get out of the way is passing at a policy level, because that's certainly going to be part of the solution.
Would either of you like to answer that? Denis, I can see.
Yes, so I love this question, and I think, Matt, you're very right that what's great about those laws is their conciseness, and that they do an excellent job of interlocking with each other. But at the same time, Asimov's work, Asimov was a very prolific writer of fiction that arises from how those fail, where they break down, what are the consequences of those. And I think it's a really, really excellent illustration of the fact that doing this is really hard, and that it's looking at how do these rules that we set, how do these guidelines that we put forth, how do these kinds of practices that we build, what happens when the rubber actually meets the road? That's where the responsibility rises. And so thinking about Asimovian laws is a great starting point, but I think it's analogous to saying, let's get good principles. And what we've been doing in the research is looking at how do you get from principles to the messiness, to the everyday, to the hidden things that happen in all the choices that we make of the day-to-day practice.
You know, you use the analogy rubber on the road, and I'm like, yeah, but which rubber and which road? If we're gonna talk about context, then universalizing is just difficult. Yeah.
Really difficult. I'm just going to share a comment from online. Someone, Michaela Greer, I wonder, someone said why aren't they using different water? And someone else said, I wonder if that's part of the performance, that the water gets dirtier and soapier. Does that speak to the performance act of embedding responsible AI? And you actually discussed that with us before you invited us in the green room.
Yeah. Yeah, because of course exchanging those things is something that I personally believe that a moderate amount of exchange with other human beings is a positive thing at every level, and that includes dirt and all bodily products, all of those things. Like it is a complete misnomer to think of ourselves as so individualized that we are deeply separated from everything. We all know that we have a microbiome, we have creatures alive in our eyebrows. We are far from the separate identities that we're often led to be.
We can't actually be responsible without acknowledging some continuity. And
Yeah.
some,
But I think also, we've all consented to share hand washing water.
Yeah.
And consent is a key part of responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it.
Great. Question?
Yeah, just a question about kind of like the transient nature of soap, because it has every time you use it nears its end. So was that kind of like contemplated in the plot of the piece, or was it, the responsibility runs out?
Yeah, so
Matt, can you repeat the question, or
yeah.
do you want me to?
no, please, would you mind?
Yes. So the questioner was asking about the transient nature of the soap, whether the fact it wears out was part of the concept.
Yeah. So yes, very much the idea that it wears out and disappears, and what for me that's about that you build a habit through doing this, that you might pick up a bar of soap with the word transparency on it and use it, and each time you use it, that word, that concept is something that you hold with you and that you take a direct relationship to, but in the doing of that you gradually erode it until the bar of soap completely disappears. And that is, for me, that's about how we collect knowledge, how we pick knowledge up. All of these policy documents are also fading into oblivion as we speak. Every one of these things is on its way to irrelevance, and it's just a question of how it takes its time to get there. And as a side issue, I also have a slight issue about artists and objects, which is that, artists are endlessly making objects as if the world needs more objects. We don't necessarily need more objects. And so I quite like the idea that this work is a work to be used and destroyed and ultimately sort of cease to exist.
Sorry, just a one more question. So is like the face on the wooden board kind of a symbol of that concept and being replaced by like something new or like more contemporary or like more relevant in the moment?
So is the space on the setting the soap sat within a symbol of some replacement?
I would say if that's the way you see it, then yes, it is.
Matt, you haven't talked much about the portraits, and we haven't seen them online, I don't think, yet. Is there any way the portraits can be played on the screen, or will they... is that feasible at the moment? Yeah,
Right.
just so
Okay.
just let's play them now, if that's okay, so that people online can see them. And
So-
can you tell us what your thinking was behind getting these portraits?
Yeah, and I first of all want to thank Melanie Pollard for the amazing portraits that you've shot. I think they're absolutely beautiful. I felt that it was really important to represent the people who worked on the project and to give them prominence and visibility within the project, so that you get to see who are the people who sat on this responsible AI project and what did they choose, and you're invited to sort of think about a slight gap between the words on the soap and the person, and to think about why this person and these words, why might they have chosen that. I also wanted to have each person holding their soap and to be in bodily relationship with their soap. So there's a sense in which this is not just an abstract concept. It is something where each person has sat with their bar of soap and had a moment with it. So
And you've set us a quandary. We've all been given a soap to take home, and of course we're all like, I'm never going to use it. And you're like, no, you have to use the soap. So
you do as you like.
we're all going to have to be tested on our responsibility to you as an artist and your concept. We've got another question coming from online.
okay.
Thank you. From Jane Prophet. Is there a connection with the use of water and the environmental cost of AI with associated water usage?
That wasn't my intention.
It's a good link, though.
It is.
It's a
It
good
is.
link.
It is
And
definitely.
100% that responsibility, responsible AI connects to the entire ecosystem of AI, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were actually talking about earlier is that, in the analysis of policy documents, we saw that sustainability was something that showed up surprisingly rarely.
Right.
However, part of that is due to the moment of when we were looking at them. So we were
Yeah.
looking at these documents that were available in 2023. Some of them were written in 2019. Some of them were written in 2021. It was before the environmental impacts of generative AI models in particular really, really hit the mainstream. And so I think there is an element to it of, if we were to do that again now, even 10 months later or something, we might see very different kinds of patterns in that. So it is a good way of capturing that, yes, this is an inescapable part of the AI discussion. It didn't really figure into what we saw, or rather its absence figured into what we saw, not its presence, but its presence is becoming more visible now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting in terms of the different levels of organisations and who has sustainability concerns. So it very much depended on the document itself, didn't it, as well?
It did. It was very much by sector. I mean, it was primarily governmental organizations that talked about sustainability, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have another observation from online. When you pick a word, it will have one meaning to you, another meaning to another. As you erode a word, are you eroding its meaning?
I think it will change. I think over time, our sense of the meaning of these words changes. So responsible AI, as you said, Susan, is having its moment. But there was, we've had a variety, there's a sort of social history already to be written about the various attempts to try and get hands around AI in responsible ways, to remove bias. Bias was a kind of phrase that was inescapable for a few years. Ethical AI, there's been a whole variety of them. I'm sure you could talk much more authoritatively about it. So even this sense of what it is that we're doing is shifting all the time, and I think that's part of what the project is trying to trying to sort of bring to light, without sort of saying, oh, it's just a sort of postmodern soup and everything means everything to everyone else. These things are actual concepts that have relevance. Transparency is important in AI.
Care is important.
It is important.
Shared understanding of practice.
It's not just a sort of semantic, a sort of escape chute. But the question is what you actually mean by that is an endlessly granular and complex thing through which we each have to sort of take the habit and enact it.
I think something that's come out really important for me from this whole project is that the process and practice of responsible AI, that policy on its own doesn't work, that it's revisiting, it's working things out on the fly, and it's being prepared to say, okay, that didn't work, or that didn't get the results we were expecting, had unexpected consequences. We've got a couple more minutes. There's one question from the audience, if you'd like to go, and then we've got one more from online.
How important was it to you that it ended up being a very manual piece of art, so it's actually very non-technical, given that AI is this complete, foot in water is long-standing human practice?
How important was it for you that it's a non-technical piece of art? Soap and water is has been time immemorial for humans using it. I'd just like to build on that and say it's obviously really interesting that Blast Theory are pioneers in digital, locative, interactive media art, and so it's a very I knew that you would choose the right technology, whether that was digital or not.
Yeah.
I
mean, my background's in theatre, and I often see performance in the work that we make, even when we're using quite a lot of technology. And we did talk early on that we would be making something that might be a film, or might be a website, or might have a digital form. But I think we had an opportunity to engage with a number of researchers working in somatic research at the Royal Technical Institute in Stockholm.
That's embodied research.
Yeah, and they were an awesome group of women who are all about suggesting that how we think and how we understand the world is embodied, and that we do ourselves a great disservice as soon as we suggest that our knowledge of the world takes place in our brains or our minds. And so that had a very strong impact on me. That really sort of shook me, where I was like, I fall into that lazy assumption all the time. So it's been something that has been very much at the front of my mind. I mean, yeah, we've never made anything like that before, but I like that sense that it's tactile. Yeah.
Can I just pick up on that for a moment? So I think it's something that we, as Hannah said earlier, we didn't really set any expectations of what would come out of this. But, and admittedly, when you told us, so the first thought was,
What?
no. But I think you hit the nail on the head really, really well, that what we see in the research is that responsible AI is not a problem of technology. It's about people and process, and in many ways the technology becomes almost incidental.
Yeah.
And so the fact that this is this representation of something that's very manual, that's very tactile, that's very non-technological while still using a technology, because soap is a technology. It's a perfect encapsulation of that fact that when we look at the new shiny modern technology, we're sort of looking at the wrong part of the picture.
Are there any other burning questions on the floor here? We'll all be here for conversation afterwards. Yes.
Is the soap scented?
Is the soap
Was
scented?
that consideration?
And is it considered?
We experimented with color and scent, but it is neither colored nor scented.
Yes, when we were looking at the soaps and they were made, we were like, what would the sense of responsible AI be? So another cryptic question to end on from somebody online. So it is the machine of constant washing, not the constant washing machine. There is no washing machine involved, right?
No, there is no washing machine involved. So the machine that we're thinking about there is machine intelligence, and more broadly about computers as machines, and about the metaphor of the human brain as a machine. So we because we live in a computer age, these computer metaphors sort of propagate over and over again about the mind as a computer and those kinds of things, which I think are deeply damaging and corrosive. They're very, very dangerous things. So yes, we're thinking about that, and the constant washing being the process of renewal and repetition through which we gain understanding around that.
Thank you. We're at time. I would like to say thank you so much to all of you who've come to the room. Thank you to the people who've joined us online. But most of all, thank you to Blast Theory, Matt Adams, and Nick, and Denis and Susan. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.